The Georgetown ballroom smelled like money and ambition. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across marble floors where Washington's elite gathered for Senator Patricia Montgomery's annual charity gala. Campaign donors in $1,000 suits, lobbyists in designer gowns, congressional staffers networking like their careers depended on it, because they did. And near the coat check, a man in a borrowed sport jacket tried to remember how to stand still without looking like he was about to bolt. Daniel Carter hadn't worn dress shoes in 4 years. The leather pinched his feet, still accustomed to the steel-toed boots he wore driving a delivery truck 60 hours a week. But tonight wasn't about comfort. Tonight was about a promise he'd made to someone who couldn't be here to see it kept. His daughter Sophie clutched his hand, her small fingers wrapped tight around his thumb. She was 8 years old, wearing a navy blue dress they'd found at the thrift store last month. He'd spent an hour ironing it this morning, making sure every wrinkle disappeared, making sure she looked like she belonged here, even if he knew they didn't. "Daddy, look at the ceiling," Sophie whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Daniel followed her gaze upward to the painted dome above them, cherubs and clouds and gold leaf that probably cost more than his annual salary. "Pretty amazing, isn't it? Mommy would have loved this." His throat tightened. "Yeah, sweetheart, she really would have." Catherine had been an activist, a community organizer, someone who believed that change happened when ordinary people showed up in rooms like this and refused to be invisible. She'd spent years fighting for health care reform, rallying support for the bill that Senator Montgomery had eventually championed. The bill that passed 3 months after Catherine died from the same cancer that better insurance might have caught earlier. The invitation had arrived 4 weeks ago, a personal note from the senator's office, handwritten on official stationery. In honor of Catherine Carter's advocacy and dedication to health care reform, we would like to invite her family to attend our annual gala. Your wife's voice mattered. We want to make sure her daughter knows that. Daniel had almost thrown it away. What was the point? Catherine was gone. No fancy party would bring her back. But then Sophie had found the invitation, had read it slowly, sounding out the bigger words. And she'd looked at him with those green eyes, Catherine's eyes, and asked if they could go see where Mommy's work had mattered. So here they were. A security guard near the entrance studied them with the kind of attention that made Daniel's skin prickle. Not welcoming attention, assessing attention. The guard was young, maybe 25, with a crew cut and shoulders that suggested he spent his off hours at the gym. His name tag read Mitchell. Daniel kept his expression neutral and moved Sophie toward the main ballroom entrance. Maybe, if they just blended in, stayed quiet, nobody would question why a delivery driver and his 8-year-old daughter were attending a $500 a plate fundraiser. "Excuse me, sir." Mitchell's voice carried that particular tone of polite aggression Daniel recognized from every interaction he'd ever had with authority. "I need to see your invitation." Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the printed email confirmation. "Right here." Mitchell took it, his eyes scanning the text with exaggerated thoroughness. Behind him, a second guard appeared. Older, heavy-set, with a radio clipped to his belt, and an expression that suggested he'd already decided Daniel was a problem. "This doesn't have a physical credential number," Mitchell said. "All legitimate invitations were sent with embedded security codes." "I wasn't sent a physical invitation, just the email." If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Then I can't verify your authenticity. Mitchell handed the paper back like it was contaminated. "This could be a forgery." "It's not a forgery. I was invited by Senator Montgomery's office. My wife—" "Sir, we have protocols." The older guard stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his radio. His name tag read, Patterson. This event hosts some of the most powerful people in Washington. We don't take chances with security. Sophie pressed closer to Daniel's leg. He could feel her trembling slightly, could sense her picking up on the shift in atmosphere. Around them, other guests were beginning to notice. A woman in pearls paused mid-conversation to stare. A congressman Daniel recognized from television raised an eyebrow before deliberately turning away. "Look," Daniel said, keeping his voice level despite the anger building in his chest. "My wife, Catherine Carter, worked with Senator Montgomery's health care initiative. She passed away 3 years ago. The senator's office sent this invitation so my daughter could see where her mother's advocacy made a difference. That's all we're here for." Mitchell and Patterson exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind that Daniel had seen countless times before. The look that said this doesn't add up and better safe than sorry, and people like this don't belong here. "I'm going to need to verify this with the event coordinator," Patterson said, "which means you'll need to wait outside while we check." "How long will that take?" "However long it takes, sir." Behind them, the whispers started. Daniel didn't need to turn around to hear them. The words floated through the air like poison. "Who is that?" "Some delivery guy, I think. Look at his shoes. Trying to crash a political fundraiser. That's bold. Security should have caught him at the door. I heard him mention a dead wife. Probably looking for sympathy donations. This is embarrassing. Can't they just remove him quietly?" Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He'd learned long ago that defending yourself only made things worse, that trying to prove you belonged somewhere only highlighted how much you didn't. Instead, he looked down at Sophie, whose lower lip had begun to tremble. "Daddy, why are they being mean?" "They're not being mean, sweetheart. They're just doing their job, making sure everyone's safe." "But we're not dangerous." "I know that. They'll figure it out too." Except he wasn't sure they would, because the truth was more complicated than that. The truth was that Daniel Carter, in his borrowed sport jacket and pinching dress shoes, looked exactly like what he was, someone from the wrong side of the economic divide, trying to occupy a space reserved for people with money and power and connections. Patterson spoke into his radio. "We have a situation at the main entrance. Possible unauthorized guest, requesting supervisor assistance." "I'm not unauthorized," Daniel said, his patience finally cracking. "I have the invitation right here. I have the email. My wife died fighting for the health care bill that Senator Montgomery sponsored. We were invited. We have every right to be here." "Sir, raising your voice isn't going to help your situation." "I'm not raising my—" Daniel stopped himself, took a breath, started again. "Please, just call the senator's office. They'll confirm we're supposed to be here. The senator is currently occupied with major donors. We're not going to interrupt her evening because you claim to have been invited." The word claim landed like a slap. Sophie tugged at Daniel's hand. "Daddy, can we just go home? Please?" The desperation in her voice broke something inside him. She'd been so excited about tonight. She'd practiced her table manners for a week, had asked him to teach her how to shake hands properly like adults did. She'd wanted to feel close to her mother, to understand the work Catherine had devoted her life to. And now she was watching strangers treat her father like a criminal, while wealthy guests looked on with a mixture of pity and disgust. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart," Daniel said quietly. "I promise." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure he believed it. A third guard arrived, younger than the others, with nervous energy and hands that moved too quickly. "What's the situation?" "Possible gatecrasher," Patterson said. "Claims he was invited but can't provide proper documentation." I can provide documentation, Daniel said, his voice tight. You're choosing not to accept it. Sir, I'm going to need you to step outside now. Patterson's hand moved toward Daniel's elbow. We can sort this out away from the other guests. Don't touch me! The words came out harder than Daniel intended. Patterson's eyes narrowed. Mitchell's hand went to his radio, and the nervous young guard took a step forward, crowding Daniel's space. Sir, you need to comply with security protocols. If you resist, we'll have to escalate this situation. I'm not resisting. I'm standing here. I'm talking. That's not resistance. Your tone is aggressive. My tone is frustrated. There's a difference. Sophie had started crying, soft, hiccuping sobs that she tried desperately to muffle against Daniel's leg. She didn't understand what was happening, only that her father was in trouble, only that the special night she'd been looking forward to was turning into a nightmare. Daddy, I'm scared. Daniel dropped to one knee, pulling Sophie close despite the guards looming over them. Hey, look at me. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay. They're going to make us leave. Maybe, but that's all right. We tried, didn't we? We showed up. That's what Mommy always said. Show up. Make your voice heard, even when it's hard. But I wanted to see where Mommy worked. I know, baby, I know. Patterson's voice cut through the moment. Sir, I need you to stand up and come with us. Now. Daniel kissed Sophie's forehead and stood slowly. His knees protested. Too many hours standing in delivery trucks. Too many years of physical work taking their toll. He placed his hand on Sophie's shoulder and prepared to walk away from the promise he'd traveled across the city to keep. That's when he noticed her. A young woman stood near the entrance to the main ballroom, perhaps 19 or 20 years old, with dark hair pulled back in an elegant twist and a burgundy dress that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. She wore a small pin on her lapel, some kind of college insignia he didn't recognize, and she was staring at him with an expression of absolute shock. Their eyes met for just a moment. Daniel didn't know her. He was certain of it. And yet something in her face suggested recognition. Not casual recognition, like you'd give someone you passed on the street. Deep recognition, the kind that reaches all the way down into memory and pulls something painful to the surface. Patterson's hand closed around Daniel's elbow. Let's go. Wait, Daniel started, but the guards weren't interested in waiting. Mitchell grabbed his other arm. Together they began guiding him, not gently, toward the exit. Sophie stumbled alongside them, still holding her father's hand, tears streaming down her face. Please don't take my daddy, she whispered. We didn't do anything wrong. The sound of her voice echoed through the entrance hall, cutting through the ambient noise of conversation and clinking glasses. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. For a few horrible seconds, every eye in the vicinity was fixed on the scene unfolding near the coat check. A photographer raised his camera, some society columnist documenting the event. The flash went off, capturing Daniel's humiliation for posterity. Tomorrow's gossip blogs would probably run the photo with some clever caption about security protocols and party crashers. Daniel stopped resisting. He let the guards pull him along, past the woman in pearls who watched with her hand over her mouth, past the congressman who suddenly found his phone extremely fascinating, past the young staffers who would probably turn this into an amusing anecdote over drinks later. They were almost to the door when the young woman in the burgundy dress moved. She didn't walk. She ran. Her heels clicked sharply against marble as she pushed through a cluster of guests, her face pale, her hand outstretched. Stop! Her voice rang out across the entrance hall, not loud but carrying absolute authority. Stop right now! The guards froze. Patterson's grip on Daniel's arm loosened slightly. Mitchell turned to see who was shouting, and Daniel watched as the young woman came to a halt 3 feet away from them, breathing hard, her eyes locked on his face with an intensity that made his skin prickle with unease. "Let him go," she said. Her voice shook, but the command was clear. "Let him go immediately." Patterson recovered first. "Miss, this is a security matter. Please return to the event." "I said let him go." Her voice gained strength, losing the tremor. "This man is not a gatecrasher. He's not a threat. And if you put your hands on him again, you'll answer to my mother." Mitchell's eyebrows rose. "And who exactly is your mother?" The young woman's chin lifted. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Senator Patricia Montgomery, and the man you're dragging out of here is Daniel Carter." She took a step closer, tears gathering in her eyes. "The man who saved my life." The entrance hall went absolutely silent. Daniel stared at the young woman, searching his memory for some connection, some moment that would explain why Senator Patricia Montgomery's daughter was claiming he'd saved her life. But his mind came up blank. He'd never met a senator's daughter. He'd never moved in circles where that would even be possible. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Daniel said quietly. "I don't know you." "Yes, you do." The young woman's voice cracked. "You just don't remember. It was 9 years ago. You were 23. I was 11. She took another step closer, and Daniel could see tears streaming freely down her face now. "Route 43, the bridge near Harper's Ferry. There was ice on the road." And just like that, Daniel's world tilted sideways. He remembered. God help him, he remembered everything. Patterson's hand fell away from Daniel's arm. Mitchell stepped back, uncertainty replacing his earlier aggression. Around them, the gathered crowd pressed closer, sensing that something significant was unfolding, something that transcended mere security protocols. The young woman wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "My name is Claire Montgomery, and 9 years ago you pulled me out of a car that was sinking into the Potomac River." Daniel's throat went dry. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Sophie tugged at his hand. "Daddy? What's she talking about?" Claire knelt down, bringing herself to Sophie's eye level. "Your daddy is a hero, a real one, and nobody's ever properly thanked him." She stood and turned to face the crowd that had gathered. Her voice grew stronger, carrying across the entrance hall with the same practiced authority her mother probably used when addressing Congress. 9 years ago, in February, my mother was driving me home from a debate competition. I was 11 years old. I'd just won first place in the regional finals. Claire's voice wavered slightly, but she pushed forward. "It was late, almost midnight. The roads were icy. My mother was exhausted from campaigning. She was running for her first Senate term." Daniel closed his eyes, but the memories came flooding back anyway. The sound of metal screaming, the splash as the car hit water, his own truck sliding to a stop on the bridge, the way his hands shook as he grabbed the tire iron from behind his seat. "A drunk driver crossed the center line," Claire continued. "Hit us head on. Our car went through the guardrail and into the river. The water was 38 degrees. The current was strong from the snowmelt." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel heard someone whisper, "I remember that accident. It was all over the news." "My mother was unconscious," Claire said. "The airbag had knocked her out. I was trapped in the back seat. The car was filling with water. I couldn't get my seatbelt undone. I couldn't reach my mother. I couldn't—" Her voice broke completely. Daniel opened his eyes and found Claire looking directly at him. And then the door opened, and a man pulled me out, dragged me to shore through water so cold I couldn't feel my legs, set me down on the riverbank and told me to stay there. Then he went back. "I went back for your mother," Daniel said quietly, his first words since the revelation began. "The car was almost completely submerged," Claire said. "Everyone said later that it was impossible, that no one could have gotten her out in time." But you did. Daniel shook his head. I just did what anyone... Don't. Claire's voice was sharp. Don't say what anyone would have done, because there were other cars on that bridge. I counted 5 of them afterward, and you were the only one who stopped, the only one who jumped into that river. Patterson cleared his throat. Miss Montgomery, we had no way of knowing. You had every way of knowing, Claire interrupted, her eyes flashing with anger remarkably similar to what Daniel imagined her mother's looked like when facing down opposition. His name was on the guest list. His invitation was valid. But you saw a man who didn't fit your expectations, and you decided he must be a fraud. She gestured around the entrance hall, at the wealthy guests in their designer clothes, at the crystal chandeliers and marble floors. This is exactly what my mother fights against. The assumption that worth equals wealth, that power equals value, that someone in a borrowed jacket couldn't possibly belong in the same room as senators and donors. Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. We were following protocol. Protocol that doesn't account for decency, Claire said. Protocol that treats people like suspects instead of guests. A commotion at the entrance to the main ballroom drew everyone's attention. The crowd parted, and a woman strode through with the kind of presence that commanded space without demanding it. Senator Patricia Montgomery was 52 years old, with steel-gray hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a midnight blue gown that was elegant without being ostentatious, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had spent 2 decades navigating the highest levels of power. She took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. The security, guards, the gathered crowd, her daughter with tears streaming down her face, and Daniel Carter standing frozen in the center of it all, with his 8-year-old daughter clutching his hand. Claire? Her voice was calm, but Daniel heard the steel underneath. What's happening? They were throwing him out, Mom. Claire's voice shook with barely controlled fury. Security was dragging Daniel Carter out of the building like he was some kind of criminal. Senator Montgomery's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, and beneath it, something that looked like shame. Mr. Carter, she said quietly, I didn't know you were here. Your office sent an invitation, Daniel said, for Catherine's work, for the health care bill. Yes. The senator moved closer, her gaze moving between Daniel and Sophie. I sent that invitation personally. I wanted to honor your wife's advocacy. I wanted... She stopped, seemed to gather herself. I wanted to thank you for so many things. She turned to Patterson and Mitchell, and her voice went cold. Which one of you initiated this? Patterson straightened. Senator, we were following standard security protocols. The guest's documentation appeared irregular. His documentation was an email from my personal office, an invitation I wrote myself. We had no way to verify that, ma'am. So rather than taking 2 minutes to check with my staff, you decided to physically remove a guest in front of his child, in front of half of Washington's political establishment? The senator's voice was quiet, but it carried. Every person in the entrance hall could hear every word. This man saved my daughter's life 9 years ago. He saved my life. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from hypothermia and nearly drowned doing it. And tonight, you dragged him toward the exit like he was trash. Patterson's face had gone pale. Senator, we apologize. We had no idea. You had every idea, Senator Montgomery interrupted. You knew his name was on the guest list. You knew my office had sent the invitation. What you didn't know was his story, and you didn't bother to find out. She looked past the guards to the gathered crowd, at the faces that had been whispering judgment minutes ago. Let me tell you about Daniel Carter, since you all seem so interested. Daniel started to protest. Senator, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She met his eyes, and he saw something in her expression that was both apology and determination. Because you never did. You never told anyone. You never asked for anything. She turned back to the crowd. 9 years ago, my daughter and I were in a car accident. Our vehicle went into the Potomac River in the middle of winter. Daniel Carter, who was driving home from his job at a warehouse, stopped his truck on the bridge. While other people called 911, while other people stood and watched, he jumped into the river. Her voice wavered slightly, but she pushed forward. The water was 38 degrees. The current was strong. Daniel had no training in water rescue, no special equipment. He was wearing jeans and a work jacket, and he still went in. Sophie was staring up at her father with wide eyes. Daniel couldn't look at her, couldn't bear to see whatever expression was on her face. He pulled Claire out first, Senator Montgomery continued. Got her to shore, then he went back for me. The car was almost completely underwater by then. The door was jammed. He had to break the window with a tire iron, drag me out through broken glass, swim to shore against the current while I was unconscious and dead weight. She paused, and Daniel could see her struggling with emotion. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital, hypothermia, pneumonia, lacerations from the broken glass. He lost his job because of the time off, lost his apartment because he couldn't make rent. Daniel's jaw tightened. He hadn't known she knew that, hadn't known anyone knew that. I tried to find him afterward, the senator said, tried to thank him properly, tried to help, but he'd moved, changed his phone number, disappeared completely. I had to, Daniel said quietly. The media attention, it was too much. Catherine was pregnant. We were trying to start a life together. I didn't want to be anyone's hero story. I just wanted to be her husband. Senator Montgomery nodded slowly. I understand that now, but it meant I never got to say thank you, never got to tell you what your sacrifice meant to our family. She moved closer to Daniel, close enough that he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the gray roots showing beneath her professionally colored hair. You gave me 9 more years with my daughter. You gave Claire a chance to grow up, to go to college, to become the remarkable young woman she is today. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Claire stepped forward and took Daniel's free hand. I wrote you letters, dozens of them. After the accident, my mom said she'd try to find an address, but she never could. What did they say? Daniel asked. Thank you. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. Over and over, just thank you for not giving up, for coming back for my mom when you could have just saved me and left, for being brave when everyone else was scared. She looked down at Sophie. Your dad is the reason I'm alive, the reason I got to graduate high school, go to college, become a person. Every birthday I've had since I was 11 exists because he didn't hesitate. Sophie's eyes were huge. Daddy, you never told me. It wasn't important, sweetheart. Yes, it was, Senator Montgomery said firmly. It was important. It is important. And I think it's time we finally acknowledged that properly. She turned to face the gathered crowd, most of whom were now watching with expressions of shame or stunned silence. I want everyone here to understand something. The man you almost threw out, the man whose daughter you watched cry while security dragged her father toward the exit, that man represents everything this fundraiser is supposed to be about. Her voice grew stronger, filling the space. We're here tonight raising money for healthcare reform, for the kind of legislation that ensures people like Catherine Carter, Daniel's late wife, don't die from treatable cancer because their insurance won't cover experimental treatments. We're here pretending to care about ordinary people, about working families, about the Americans who struggle every day just to survive. She gestured to Daniel. And yet, when one of those Americans walks through our door, we treat him like a threat. We question his legitimacy. We assume the worst, because he doesn't wear the right clothes or have the right credentials or move in the right circles. The senator's eyes swept across the crowd, landing on specific faces. How many of you whispered? How many of you assumed he was a gatecrasher? How many of you watched security grab him and thought, "Good, they caught him"? Silence. Absolute and damning. That's what I thought. Senator Montgomery turned back to Daniel. I owe you an apology, not just for tonight, for 9 years of not finding you, for not being able to thank you properly, for failing to make sure that the man who saved my life and my daughter's life was taken care of. You don't owe me anything, Daniel said. I did what anyone should do. But not what anyone did, Claire interjected. Only you. Daniel looked at his daughter, who was still processing everything she'd learned in the last 10 minutes. Sophie, I'm sorry. I should have told you. I didn't want you to think that was the important part of who I am. But it is important, Sophie said. You saved people. Like a superhero. Not like a superhero, just like a person who couldn't walk away. Senator Montgomery placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder. Walk away from what? A family drowning. Most people do walk away. Most people find reasons why it's not their problem, why someone else will handle it, why they don't want to get involved. She glanced back at Patterson and Mitchell, who were still standing awkwardly near the entrance. You two are dismissed. Report to my chief of staff tomorrow morning. We'll be reviewing our security protocols thoroughly. The guards left without a word. The senator then addressed the entire gathered crowd. The gala will continue as planned, but I want everyone to remember what happened here tonight. Remember that we almost threw out a hero because we couldn't see past our assumptions. Remember that worth isn't measured by wealth. And remember that the people we claim to fight for aren't abstract concepts. They're real human beings who deserve our respect, not our suspicion. She turned back to Daniel. Please stay, both of you. I'd like to introduce you properly, not as the man who saved us, but as Catherine's husband and Sophie's father, as someone whose family has contributed more to the cause of healthcare reform than half the donors in that ballroom. Daniel hesitated. Every instinct told him to leave, to take Sophie home, to retreat back into the comfortable anonymity he'd built over the past 9 years. But then he looked at his daughter, whose eyes were shining with something that looked like pride, and he remembered why he'd come. For Catherine, to show Sophie where her mother's work had mattered. Okay, he said quietly, we'll stay. Claire linked her arm through his. Come on, I want to show you something. She led them into the main ballroom with Senator Montgomery walking alongside Sophie. The crowd parted as they passed, guests no longer whispering but watching with expressions that ranged from respect to shame to genuine curiosity. The ballroom was even more impressive than the entrance hall. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Georgetown waterfront. Round tables covered in white linens surrounded a raised platform where musicians played softly, and along one wall, a series of photographs documented the senator's healthcare reform efforts. Claire stopped in front of a particular display. This is what I wanted you to see. It was a memorial wall covered with photographs and names, people who had died from preventable causes because of inadequate health care. People whose stories had motivated the reform legislation. And there, in the center, was Catherine's photograph. Daniel's breath caught. It was a picture he'd taken himself, 3 months before her diagnosis. Catherine laughing, her eyes bright, full of life and determination. Beneath it, a plaque, Catherine Carter, 1985-2019, community advocate, activist, and voice for healthcare reform. Her tireless work helped shape legislation that will save countless lives. She died too soon from a disease that better insurance might have caught earlier. We honor her memory by continuing her fight." Sophie stared at her mother's picture, her small hand reaching out to touch the frame. "Mommy looks happy." "She was happy," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "She loved what she did, loved fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves." Senator Montgomery stood beside them. "Catherine came to my office 6 times in the 2 years before she died. Every time she brought binders full of research, stories from people in her community, evidence of how the healthcare system was failing ordinary Americans. She was relentless." "She was," Daniel agreed. "When she believed in something, she wouldn't let go." "She's the reason I fought so hard for that bill," the senator continued. "Even after she passed, her voice was in my head, during every debate, every negotiation, asking me if I'd done enough, if I'd fought hard enough, if the compromise was worth it." Daniel looked at the photograph for a long moment. "She would have been honored to be here, to see this." "She should have been here," Claire said quietly. "She deserved to see the change she helped create." They stood in silence, the 4 of them, united by grief and gratitude and the complicated weight of survival. Finally, Senator Montgomery spoke. "Daniel, I need to ask you something, and please know you can say no." He turned to face her. "What do you do now? For work?" "I drive a delivery truck, 60 hours a week. It's steady. Benefits aren't great, but they're something." "And Sophie?" "After school program until I can pick her up. Weekends we spend together. It's not much, but we manage." The senator nodded slowly. "I want to offer you a position on my staff, community outreach coordinator. You'd work with families like yours, people who are struggling, who need help navigating systems that weren't designed for them, people who Catherine fought for." Daniel started to shake his head, but she held up her hand. "I'm not offering this because of what you did 9 years ago. I'm offering because you understand the lives we're trying to impact. You've lived it. You're living it. That perspective is invaluable." "Senator, I don't have the qualifications." "You have the most important qualification, lived experience. Everything else can be taught." She paused. "The salary is $60,000, full benefits, health, dental, vision, college fund contributions, and regular hours, 9 to 5, weekends off." Daniel's throat went tight. 60,000 was almost double what he made now. Regular hours meant he could actually see Sophie in the evenings. Full benefits meant better doctors, better care, the kind of security he hadn't had since before Catherine got sick. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it." Senator Montgomery's expression softened. "I know this is a lot. Tonight has been a lot, but I meant what I said earlier. I've spent 9 years wanting to thank you properly. This isn't charity. This is recognizing that you have something valuable to offer and creating a position where those skills can actually make a difference." Claire squeezed his arm. "You'd be good at it. Really good." Sophie tugged at Daniel's jacket. "Daddy, could I go to art camp if you took the job? Jessica goes to art camp every summer and she says it's amazing." The question broke Daniel's heart. Because of course Sophie wanted art camp. Of course she had dreams and wants that his current salary couldn't cover. How many other things had she stopped asking for because she knew the answer would be no? "Yeah, sweetheart," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "If I took the job, you could go to art camp." Sophie's smile was radiant. Senator Montgomery handed him a business card. "My personal cell is there. Think about it. Take your time. But know that the offer is genuine, and that having you as part of our team would be an honor." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Daniel and Sophie ate dinner at a table with Claire and several of the senator's staff members. people approached throughout the meal, not to gawk, but to genuinely introduce themselves, to share their own stories of struggle, to thank him, not just for saving the senator, but for representing something they all needed to remember, that heroes don't always look like what we expect. As the gala wound down and guests began to leave, Daniel found himself standing near the memorial wall again, looking at Catherine's photograph. She'd be proud of you, you know. He turned to find Claire beside him. For staying, she continued. For letting people see you, I know that's hard for you. How do you know that? Because Mom tried to find you for 9 years. You're very good at disappearing. Daniel smiled slightly. I just wanted a quiet life, a normal life. After the accident, after the media attention, it was too much. I understand that. Claire's voice was gentle. But sometimes the quiet comes at a cost. Sometimes hiding means missing out on connections that could change everything. She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope. I told you I wrote letters. I kept them. All of them. I'd like you to have them when you're ready. Daniel took the envelope, feeling the weight of years of gratitude and words unsaid. Thank you, he said simply. Claire hugged him, brief but fierce. No, thank you, for everything. Senator Montgomery appeared with Sophie, who was fighting to keep her eyes open. I think someone's ready for home. Daniel scooped his daughter into his arms. She settled against his chest with a contented sigh, her hand clutching the edge of his jacket. Senator, Patricia, she interrupted. Call me Patricia. Patricia, thank you for tonight, for everything. I'll think about your offer. That's all I ask. She walked them to the entrance where the night air was cool and clear. And Daniel, whatever you decide, know that you're welcome here. Always. This community, the real community, the one that fights for people like you and Catherine, you're part of it, whether you work for me or not. Daniel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He carried Sophie out into the night, past the valet station, toward the parking garage where his 15-year-old truck waited. The same truck he'd been driving 9 years ago when he pulled over on that bridge. Sophie stirred in his arms. Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart? I'm proud of you. The words hit harder than anything else that had happened tonight. I'm proud of you too, baby. Mommy would be happy that we came, that we showed up. Yeah, Daniel said, his voice breaking. She would be. He settled Sophie into her car seat, buckled her in carefully, and stood for a moment looking back at the glittering ballroom. Through the windows, he could see Senator Montgomery and Claire standing together, watching him leave. He raised his hand in a small wave. They waved back, and Daniel Carter, delivery driver, widower, and reluctant hero, drove home through the streets of Washington, D.C., with his daughter sleeping peacefully beside him and a future that, for the first time in years, held something that looked like possibility. 3 days later, Daniel sat in his truck outside Sophie's school, staring at Senator Montgomery's business card. He'd looked at it maybe 100 times since the gala, turned it over in his hands, memorized the phone number, but he hadn't called. The passenger door opened. His co-worker Marcus slid into the seat, holding 2 coffee cups from the gas station down the street. You're doing that thing again, Marcus said, handing Daniel a cup. The thinking thing, where you think yourself into staying exactly where you are. Daniel pocketed the card. I'm not. Yeah, you are. Been doing it the whole 3 years I've known you. Marcus took a sip of his coffee. So what is it this time? Why are you talking yourself out of whatever that card represents? It's a job offer from Senator Montgomery. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. The senator, as in the actual United States Senator Patricia Montgomery? Yeah. And you haven't called her back because... Daniel stared out the windshield at the school playground where kids were running and laughing during recess. Because I'm a delivery driver, Marcus. I've got a high school diploma and a CDL. What business do I have working for a senator? What business did you have jumping into a frozen river to save 2 people? Daniel's jaw tightened. The story had made the local news 3 days ago. Some society blogger from the gala had posted about it online. By morning, it had gone viral. Humble hero who saved. Senator refuses recognition for nearly a decade. The headlines made him sound noble. Made him sound like he'd been hiding for honorable reasons. They didn't mention that he'd been terrified. That he still woke up some nights gasping for air, remembering what it felt like to be underwater in the dark, his lungs burning, Catherine's face the only thing keeping him going. They didn't mention that he'd spent the last 9 years trying to become invisible, because being visible meant remembering, and remembering hurt too much. That was different, Daniel said quietly. How? Because someone was drowning. I didn't have time to think about whether I was qualified. Marcus leaned back in his seat. Maybe that's your problem, man. You think too much about being qualified, about deserving things, about whether you're good enough. I'm just being realistic. No, you're being scared. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. And I get it. Catherine died. You've been surviving instead of living. That's what grief does. But this is a chance to do more than survive. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons why accepting the senator's offer was foolish, impractical, arrogant even. But before he could, his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Mr. Carter, this is Claire Montgomery. I hope it's okay that I got your number from my mom. I wanted to share something with you. Below the text was a link to a news article. Daniel clicked it. The headline read, "Security guards fired after attempting to remove hero from charity gala." His stomach dropped. The article detailed what had happened 3 nights ago. The confrontation, the humiliation. Patterson and Mitchell's names were listed, along with the announcement that they'd been terminated for violating the senator's guest protocols and treating an invited guest with unwarranted aggression and prejudicial judgment. Marcus read over his shoulder and let out a low whistle. Damn, she actually fired them. She shouldn't have done that, Daniel said. They were just doing their job. They were doing their job badly, with prejudice. Marcus met Daniel's eyes. You're doing it again, making excuses for people who treated you like garbage, taking responsibility for other people's failures. They have families, Marcus. They need those jobs. And you have a family, a daughter who deserves better than watching her dad work himself to death driving a truck 60 hours a week. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Another text from Claire. I know you're probably upset about the security guards, but Mom says that accountability matters, that if we want real change, we have to enforce real consequences. She's right. Those men judged you based on your clothes and your shoes, not your character. That's not security, that's discrimination. Another message followed immediately. Also, have you thought more about the job offer? Mom really means it. We need someone like you. Daniel set the phone down. They need someone, sure, but someone with a college degree, someone who knows policy and legislation and how to navigate political circles. They need someone who understands what it's like to be on the other side, Marcus countered. Someone who knows what it feels like when systems fail you, when insurance won't cover the treatment that might save your wife's life, when you lose your job because you spent 2 weeks recovering from saving someone else. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. How do you know about that? Because you talk in your sleep during lunch breaks. Catherine's name. Something about hospital bills. Marcus's voice softened. I'm not trying to push you into something you don't want, but I am saying that maybe you're the exact right person for this job. Not despite your experience, but because of it. The school bell rang. Kids started pouring out of the building, a chaotic flood of backpacks and laughter. Daniel spotted Sophie near the middle of the crowd, her dark hair in the ponytail he'd managed that morning after 3 failed attempts. She saw his truck and waved. Her whole face lit up. That smile. That was what mattered. That was what kept him going. "I need to think about it," Daniel said. Marcus opened the door to leave. "Yeah, you do. But while you're thinking, ask yourself something. What would Catherine want you to do?" He climbed out and headed toward his own vehicle, leaving Daniel alone with the question he'd been avoiding for 3 days. What would Catherine want? Sophie reached the truck and climbed in, chattering immediately about her day. Art class, the science experiment that had gone wrong, the boy who'd pulled her hair at recess until the teacher made him apologize. Daniel listened, responding at the right moments, but his mind was elsewhere. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Daniel sat at their small kitchen table and pulled out the envelope Claire had given him, the one with 9 years of unsent letters inside. He opened it slowly. The first letter was written in the careful, deliberate handwriting of an 11-year-old. "Dear Mr. Carter, my name is Claire. You saved my life. I don't really know what to say except thank you. My mom says you were very brave. She's trying to find you so we can say thank you in person, but she says you moved. I hope you're okay. I hope your life is good. I think about you every day. Thank you for not giving up." Claire Daniel's eyes burned. He set the letter down and picked up the next one. This one was dated 6 months later. "Dear Mr. Carter, it's me again, Claire. I'm in 6th grade now. We're learning about heroes in English class. The teacher asked us to write about someone we consider a hero. I wrote about you. I got an A. I told the class about how you jumped into the river even though you didn't have to, even though it was dangerous. My friend Jessica asked if you had superpowers. I said, no, you're just a really good person. I still think about you. I wonder if you have kids. I wonder if they know how brave their dad is. Thank you for saving us." Claire Daniel worked through the stack chronologically. Letters from 7th grade, 8th grade, high school, each one marking another year of Claire's life, another birthday, another milestone, another moment she got to experience because Daniel had chosen to stop on that bridge. The final letter was dated just 2 months ago. "Dear Mr. Carter, I'm 19 now, in college, pre-law, because I want to fight for people the way my mom does, the way you did for us. I've been writing these letters for 9 years. I don't know if I'll ever send them. Mom says she might never find you. Maybe you don't want to be found, and I understand that. I understand that being a hero doesn't mean you want to be called one, but I want you to know something. Every good thing in my life exists because you didn't hesitate. Every morning I wake up, every class I take, every friend I make, every dream I have for the future, all of it is because you chose to act when everyone else chose to watch. I don't know if I'll ever get to thank you in person, but I'm writing this anyway because maybe someday you'll read it. Maybe someday you'll understand what your choice meant. You gave me a life, Mr. Carter. I'm trying to make it worth the risk you took." With eternal gratitude, Claire Montgomery Daniels set down the last letter, his vision blurred with tears he'd been holding back for 3 days. 9 years. She'd written to him for 9 years, never knowing if he'd see the words, never knowing if he understood. His phone sat on the table beside the stack of letters. Senator Montgomery's business card was propped against it. What would Catherine want? He knew the answer, had always known it. Catherine would want him to stop hiding, stop surviving, stop letting fear make his decisions. She would want him to show Sophie that worth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you do with what you're given. That accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. It means honoring what was lost by building something new. Daniel picked up his phone. Before he could talk himself out of it, he dialed the number on the card. It rang twice before Senator Montgomery answered. "Daniel, I was hoping you'd call." "I'm sorry it took me so long." "Don't apologize. I know this is a big decision." Daniel took a breath. "I want to accept the job. I want to try." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "I'm glad. Really glad." "I don't know if I'll be any good at it," Daniel admitted. "I don't have the background or the training or—" "Daniel." The senator's voice was firm but kind. "You have something more valuable than any of that. You have empathy. You understand struggle in a way that most people in Washington never will. That's not a deficit. That's your greatest strength." "When would you want me to start?" "Take your time. Give proper notice at your current job. Get Sophie settled. We'll start in 3 weeks. That work?" "Yeah, that works." "Good." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Welcome to the team, Daniel." After they hung up, Daniel sat for a long moment in the quiet kitchen. The letters were spread across the table. Catherine's photo hung on the wall above them, the same one from the memorial display, the one where she was laughing. "I'm trying, Kat," he whispered to the photograph. "I'm really trying." The next morning, Daniel gave his notice at the delivery company. His supervisor was disappointed but understanding. Marcus hugged him hard enough to crack ribs. "About damn time," Marcus said. "Your kid's gonna be so proud." Sophie's reaction when he told her that evening was everything he'd hoped for. She screamed with joy, threw her arms around his neck, and asked 3 times if this meant she could really go to art camp. "Yeah, sweetheart, you can really go to art camp. And you'll be home for dinner every night." Every night. She buried her face in his shoulder. "Mommy would be happy." "Yeah," Daniel said, his voice rough. "She would be." 3 weeks later, Daniel's first day at Senator Montgomery's office started with an orientation that felt surreal. Claire gave him a tour, introduced him to staffers, showed him his office, small but bright, with a window that overlooked the Capitol building. "It's not much," Claire said, "but it's yours." Daniel stared at the desk, the computer, the nameplate that read Daniel Carter, Community Outreach Coordinator. "It's perfect." His first assignment was to review constituent letters, hundreds of them, stories from families struggling with medical debt, with inadequate insurance, with systems that seemed designed to fail them, stories like Catherine's, like his own. And for the first time in 9 years, Daniel felt like his pain had purpose. 6 months passed, then a year. Daniel's work became a bridge between Senator Montgomery's office and the people she fought for. He organized town halls in working-class neighborhoods. He helped families navigate insurance claims. He told Catherine's story and his own, not for recognition, but to help others understand they weren't alone. Sophie thrived. She joined the art club at school, made friends, stopped apologizing for wanting things, stopped shrinking herself to fit into the space left by their poverty. One evening, Daniel attended a community meeting in the same neighborhood where he and Catherine had lived before she got sick. He was there to discuss healthcare legislation, to gather stories, to listen. An older woman raised her hand. "I just want to say thank you for doing this, for caring enough to show up." Daniel shook his head. "I'm just doing what I can." "No," the woman said firmly. "You're doing what most people won't. You're using your pain to help others. That's not just doing what you can. That's choosing to make your struggle mean something." Later that night, Daniel tucked Sophie into bed. She showed him a drawing she'd made in art camp, a man jumping into water, a child on the shore, a rainbow overhead. "That's you," she said. "Saving Claire. Ms. Rodriguez said we should draw our heroes, so I drew you." Daniel's throat tightened. "I'm not a hero, baby." "Yes, you are." Sophie's voice was certain. Absolute. Not because you saved Claire, because you keep choosing to be brave, even when it's hard. She reached under her pillow and pulled out something small and worn. One of Catherine's old bracelets, a simple chain with a single charm that read, "Keep going." "I found this in your drawer," Sophie said. "I hope that's okay. It makes me feel close to Mommy." Daniel blinked back tears. "Of course it's okay." "Do you think she's proud of us, of what we're doing?" "Yes, sweetheart, I think she's very proud." Sophie smiled and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing deepened into sleep. Daniel sat beside her bed for a long time, watching her peaceful face, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From that frozen bridge 9 years ago to the gala confrontation to this moment, a father and daughter building a life that honored loss without being defined by it. His phone buzzed, a text from Senator Montgomery. "Great work on the community forum tonight. You're making a real difference, Daniel." Another text came through, this one from Claire. "Lunch tomorrow? There's someone I want you to meet. A journalist writing about healthcare heroes. She wants to feature you and Catherine's story." Daniel stared at the messages. A year ago, the thought of publicity would have sent him running, but now he understood that hiding didn't protect anyone, that his story, Catherine's story, could help other families feel less alone, could inspire other people to act when action was needed. He typed back, "Lunch sounds good, and yes to the interview. On one condition, Catherine gets equal billing." This was always her fight. Claire responded immediately, "Deal. She'd be so proud of you." Daniel set down his phone and looked around Sophie's room. The art on the walls, the books on the shelves, the evidence of a life that was more than just surviving. He thought about Catherine, about the woman who'd taught him that showing up mattered, that fighting for others was the most important work anyone could do. That love meant pushing forward even when everything hurt. He thought about Claire's letters. 9 years of gratitude, 9 years of a life lived fully because he'd made one choice on one frozen night. He thought about Sophie sleeping peacefully, no longer afraid that wanting things was selfish, no longer watching her father disappear into exhaustion and grief. And he thought about himself, about the man who'd spent 9 years trying to be invisible, who'd believed that heroism was a burden instead of a calling, who'd thought that accepting help meant admitting weakness. That man was gone. In his place was someone who understood that strength came in many forms, that accepting your worth wasn't arrogance, it was acknowledgement, that moving forward didn't erase the past, it honored it by building something meaningful from the pain. Daniel kissed Sophie's forehead and stood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new families to help, new stories to hear, new ways to turn his grief into something that served others. But tonight, in this quiet moment, he let himself feel something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the peace of forgetting, not the peace of avoiding, but the peace that comes from choosing to show up, from letting people see you, from accepting that your struggle, your loss, your pain, your survival has value beyond what you ever imagined. Daniel walked to the living room and stood before Catherine's photograph, the one where she was laughing, full of life and purpose. "We're okay, Cat," he whispered. "Sophie's thriving. I'm doing the work you would have done. We're making it count." He could almost hear her response, could almost see that smile she used to give him when he was being too hard on himself. "I always knew you would. You just needed to believe it too." The next morning, Daniel woke early, made Sophie's breakfast, packed her lunch, walked her to the bus stop and watched her climb aboard with her friends, laughing about something only 8-year-olds found hilarious. Then he drove to the office, parked his car, a newer model now, reliable, and walked through the Capitol Hill morning with his head up and his shoulders back. When he reached Senator Montgomery's office, Claire was waiting at the entrance. "Ready for your interview?" Daniel smiled. "Yeah, I'm ready." Because he was. Ready to tell Catherine's story, ready to honor her fight, ready to show Sophie and everyone else that heroes don't wear capes or seek recognition. They show up, they do the work, they turn their pain into purpose. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, they get the chance to make their survival mean something. Daniel Carter had jumped into a frozen river 9 years ago and saved 2 lives. But in choosing to stop hiding, in accepting his worth, in using his experience to help others, he'd saved 1 more, his own. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.